We love the sweet illusion of order. The idea that brilliant masterminds are playing high-stakes geopolitical chess. But let's be honest, history is mostly run by pure human frailty. A bad translation, a basic math error, or an exhausted clerk who just wanted to finish a shift. Human history hangs by a thread of clerical errors. Welcome to the paper glitch and the microscopic mistakes that inadvertently built the modern world. Our descent into chaos begins in 1889 with a single weaponized word. Welcome to the scramble for Africa, essentially a corporate hostile takeover on a continental scale, where European powers grabbed land just to look cool in front of each other. Italy was late to the imperial game and suffering from a massive case of FOMO. They targeted Ethiopia. The problem was, Ethiopia was ruled by Emperor Menelik II, a man far too strategically brilliant to let his country get openly conquered. To avoid an expensive war, both sides sat down in the mountain town of Wuchale to sign a treaty of friendship. It was hyped up as a masterpiece of peaceful diplomacy. Except for one tiny detail. They forgot that when you write a contract in two completely different languages, you should probably make sure they say the exact same thing. In the Italian version, Article 17 stated that Ethiopia must conduct all of its foreign affairs through Rome. Just like that, Italy's regional marketing team legally turned a sovereign empire into a helpless protectorate without firing a single bullet. But in the Amharic version signed by Menelik, the text said Ethiopia can choose to use Italy's diplomatic channels. History still argues whether this was a deliberate act of deception or a catastrophic translator oversight, but the geopolitical domino effect was already set in motion, and it wasn't going to be settled in a conference room. When Menelik found out from British diplomats that Rome was bragging that Ethiopia was their new pet, he did not file an administrative complaint. He completely tore up the treaty. Italy, deeply offended that anyone would question their terrible grammar, launched an invasion to enforce their version of the verb. But they spectacularly miscalculated. Menelik had spent months quietly buying massive stockpiles of modern firearms from France and Russia. In 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, the Ethiopian forces utterly annihilated the invading Italian army. It was an unprecedented, staggering event, an African nation decisively crushing a European superpower. A single shifted verb altered the course of two continents. Because of this linguistic glitch, Ethiopia remained uncolonized, becoming a permanent global symbol of sovereign defiance. But history has a notoriously dark sense of irony. Decades later, the lingering humiliation of that 1896 defeat became the toxic, obsessive core identity of a young Italian radical named Benito Mussolini. Driven by a desperate, fragile ego to avenge the mistake of Wuchale, the fascist dictator launched a brutal, illegal invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. That single act of unprovoked aggression completely shattered the credibility of the League of Nations, proved to Adolf Hitler that international law was a joke, and lit the fuse for World War II. Millions of lives were unraveled because an administrative document couldn't reconcile the difference between must and may. A basic math error can accidentally slice a planet in half. The year is 1494. Christopher Columbus has just stumbled back to Europe after hitting the Caribbean, and Spain and Portugal, the two naval alpha dogs of the era, are about to murder each other over who gets to loot the rest of the planet. To prevent a global war that would ruin everyone's quarterly profits, Pope Alexander VI steps in as a corporate mediator. The two empires meet in a tiny town called Tordesillas. The Pope's solution is wonderfully simple. He draws a literal line in the ocean, exactly 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. Everything discovered to the west belongs to Spain. Everything to the east belongs to Portugal. It sounds clean, elegant, and mathematically absolute, except for one massive, glaring issue. In 1494, human science had a pretty severe limitation. Nobody actually knew how to measure longitude at sea. Marine clocks wouldn't be invented for another 300 years. Even worse, Spain and Portugal used fundamentally different definitions for a nautical mile, and their global maps were based on data from Ptolemy, who had been dead for 13 centuries. Their Google Maps was over 1,000 years out of date. In their heads, the Earth was much smaller than reality. Because of this mathematical mismatch, the Portuguese experts mapped the line significantly further west into the Atlantic than the Spanish realized they were conceding on paper. The Spanish signed the treaty, completely confident that the Portuguese had just traded away their future for empty, useless saltwater. They thought they had pulled off the ultimate real estate scam. Cut to 6 years later, the year 1500, a Portuguese explorer named Pedro Alvarez Cabral is sailing south to navigate around Africa. To avoid bad winds, he swings incredibly wide out into the Atlantic and unexpectedly hits a massive wall of land. It isn't a small island. It's the immense easternmost bulge of South America. When they checked the coordinates against the Treaty of Tordesillas, the Portuguese realized something hilarious. Because of the math error they built into the treaty 6 years prior, this giant, uncharted piece of the New World fell just east of the line. It legally belonged to Portugal. That land was Brazil. Think about the absolute scale of this blunder. This single cartographic mistake is the sole reason why over 200 million people in South America speak Portuguese today, while everyone else speaks Spanish. The entire geopolitical layout of a hemisphere wasn't some grand imperial master plan. It's just the permanent scar of an era when old men in robes couldn't agree on how long a mile was. Our final mistake proves just how terrifyingly fragile the modern world order truly is. Picture the height of the Cold War, a global nuclear gridlock that everyone assumed would only end with a massive military invasion or a catastrophic world war. Instead, it was brought down by a middle management spokesperson who simply forgot to read the back page of his briefing notes. The date is November 9th, 1989, and the East German communist regime is about to accidentally self-destruct in real time. The Iron Curtain is leaking like a broken pipe, with hundreds of thousands of citizens escaping to the west through neighboring countries. Desperate to stop the bleeding, the Politburo drafts a classic authoritarian stalling tactic, a new temporary travel law. The plan is to allow citizens to apply for visas, but channel them through a brutal, slow bureaucratic process. Crucially, this law is supposed to take effect the next morning, giving border guards time to read the guidelines. But the plan lacked one critical element: basic communication. The man chosen to announce this delicate, explosive policy is press spokesman Gunter Schabowski. Now, Gunter had just spent the last several days on vacation, completely missing the high-level meetings where this law was finalized. Right before he walked out to face the international media, a colleague literally shoved the newly drafted memo into his hands. Schabowski, being a busy man, just slid it into his pocket without reading it. The press conference drags on for a boring hour. Schabowski drones on about industrial production quotas while everyone falls asleep. But at 1853, a prominent Italian journalist raises his hand and fires a direct question. You're talking about new travel freedom, but when does it actually start? Schabowski freezes. He pulls the unread document out of his pocket and starts reading it aloud to the world for the very first time in his life. He mumbles through the dense legalese, completely missing the critical instruction written on the back page about waiting until morning. He reaches the end of the text, looks up at the cameras, and panics. As far as I know, it takes effect immediately, without delay. The announcement was live. Within minutes, 20,000 East Berliners marched directly to the checkpoints. The border guards, left completely out of the loop because corporate headquarters hadn't sent out the updated guidelines, were blindsided. They frantically called their superiors, but the top military brass was paralyzed by fear. At the Bornholmer Strasse crossing, a lone commander named Harald Jaeger faced a terrifying choice: order his men to machine gun a peaceful crowd of his own neighbors, or violate his standing orders. The phone lines remained dead. The crowd pressed harder against the gates. At 23:30, abandoned by his own government, Jaeger gave up. He yelled the historic words, open the barrier.
The Berlin Wall did not fall because of a brilliant military campaign. It fell because an out-of-the-loop spokesperson didn't read his brief, guessed the answer to a question on live television, and accidentally dismantled a totalitarian regime in a single second. Within a year, Germany was reunified, the entire Soviet Union collapsed, and the Cold War ended not with a nuclear explosion, but with an administrative sigh. So, what's the real takeaway here? Global geopolitics is still entirely at the mercy of minor blunders, typos, and simple human misunderstandings. We have to study these anomalies to truly understand the hidden laws of the modern world. Don't get lost in the noise. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a new glitch in history. And please, try not to make any stupid mistakes today.